Hey, what's going on, team? Today we're going to be talking about core training in a little bit more detail, and we're really going to get into some of the musculature that is working when we're actually trying to use our core, and then what those muscles are optimized to do. Tomorrow's video is actually going to go into a little more detail on like how to actually do some of these moves properly, some of the moves I use the most for core training, and then also how to apply that to some of the bigger compound lifts. However, today's video is just going to be talking about the musculature, give you guys a good sense of the anatomy that's at play when we're using our core, and then again, how those muscles are really working and how to use them best to get a nice, strong, stable core. So let's talk about some of the muscles right off the bat. So we have four main abdominal wall muscles. Now I'm specifically talking about the front of the abdomen, the six-pack type muscles, the obliques that you probably hear a lot about. So if we talk about like that six-pack muscle, that's actually our rectus abdominis here at the top. And so the rectus abdominis does a few things. So first of all, it attaches up here on the ribs and then down here on the pelvis, right? So this is the front of the body here, and you have your ribs up here and then your pelvis down here. If you look at the attachment points, it's very clear that this muscle is going to do one thing, and that's flex the trunk. So here up in blue, flex the trunk. It's also, since it's attaching to the pelvis, it's also going to stabilize that pelvis. Then it's also going to compress the abdomen as well. Now we'll notice, since these are color-coded, a lot of these muscles do the same thing. The external oblique, which is one of your two obliques, does the same thing. It flexes the trunk, except if you look at the fiber direction, it's actually not optimized for flexion because the fiber direction actually is going down at an angle. So it's more optimized for rotation as well as compression and stabilization. Same thing is true with this internal oblique down here. So the internal oblique is actually moving in the opposite direction. The fibers are actually going up, so they're crisscrossing here with this external oblique, and it's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to flex the trunk, compress that abdomen, and then it's also going to stabilize that pelvis and do a lot of rotation. So if we look at the difference between the fiber direction of the rectus abdominis as well as the external internal oblique, we see the rectus abdominis, it's really optimized for that flexion. In the external internal oblique, they're really optimized for that stabilization, compression, especially that rotation, right? However, there's a big difference between the rectus abdominis and these external internal obliques that sort of gives you an idea of what the core muscles might be best at. The internal oblique is actually your thickest by cross-sectional area, your thickest abdominal wall muscle, whereas the rectus abdominis is actually your thinnest. So despite this being a nice big long muscle and this being a little bit shorter, this is actually more optimized to do its job than this might be. And then if we look at the last abdominal wall muscle here, the transversus abdominis, this might be not one that you've heard of. However, this muscle does a really good job at compression, really good job at stabilization, and then also a little bit of rotation when it's working alongside these internal-external obliques. So we're seeing some things here, right? We're seeing that the abdominal wall muscles do a lot of flexion. So if you're thinking like a crunch, right, it's going to do a lot of that motion right here, up and down. But it's also going to compress really hard. It's going to help with that rotation. It's also going to really help with stabilization of this pelvis here. So once we look at all those muscles, we notice that it's really trying to stabilize our pelvis and keep us in a neutral position. And we'll talk about how compression, flexion, and stabilization all play a role in the abdominal wall muscles. So if we look at this video here, so this is me doing a dying bug exercise. Now, my main goal in this drill is to keep my lower back pressed against the ground. Now, the reason that is because I'm trying to stabilize my pelvis through this motion. And essentially what we want to do is we want to create crossover between this dying bug position where I'm laying on my back on the ground and doing a deadlift or a squat or a bench press, where spinal positioning actually plays a huge role in how your lower and upper limbs will move through those motions, right? So here in this dying bug, as I reach out, I'm actually continuing to press my lower back against the ground. Now, as much as I'm not crunching up, I would guarantee you I'm creating as much flexion torque, right? If we think about the crunch and how much flexion we're causing, I'm probably causing as much flexion torque as I would be in a crunch, just trying to hold myself neutral. So that's that rectus abdominis, that internal oblique and that external oblique working really hard just to hold my pelvis neutral and not letting it drop, right? Not letting this knee drop out and down and creating a lot of big arch in my low back. So I'm breathing in here. As I return back to neutral, I'm breathing out really hard, pushing right to that abdomen, and then coming back to neutral. And you can see this stays really nice and locked, and then this low back has not moved at all. Right, so that is the main function of our abdominal muscles, is to stabilize our pelvis, create that compression, and then create flexion, but not create flexion as to actually flex the trunk. Now it does definitely do that. If I'm laying down, they're going to help me get up. But in reality, in most circumstances, we want to have a nice neutral pelvis, like our guy right here. So this is a nice neutral lower spine, nice neutral pelvis for everyday standing posture. That is the goal of our abdominal wall muscles. If you guys have any questions, please shoot me a DM. Watch tomorrow's video where I talk a little more in depth about how exactly those muscles are going to work in this dying bug, in a forearm bridge, and in a deadlift as well. If you guys don't follow me already, follow me on Instagram. We got tiny whiteboard workouts as well as John Williams training. And also go see this video on YouTube. The YouTube is Tiny Whiteboard Workouts. Check out my website, tinywhiteboardworkouts.com or trainwithjohn.info. Both send you to the same place. There will be a blog post on core training coming out this week as well, so check that out and get your core training right, my friends.